Hi everyone, I'm Bryce Whitty from Technical.com. I will be handling and reading the questions to Ken. I'll answer any questions I can, if I know the answer, but if not, we will be waiting till the end of the webinar to read the questions. Please keep them brief because I know they're going to come in fairly thick and fast, and I'll do my best to keep up with them, but take it away, Ken.
All right. Thanks, Bryce, and thank you all for being here. Presumably, most of you have either were here last week or have watched the replay. I normally expect fewer attendees on the second session. I've been doing these two-part webinars probably 4 or 5 times now, and generally the first session weeds out some people think, oh, that's too much work, or I don't do that much virus repair or whatever. But we had kind of an anomaly last week, and I want to start off by apologizing to those of you that tried to get in and were kept out. My service is set up for up to 500 attendees. What they didn't tell me is I have to tell them in advance if I expect more than 100. So this time I told them in advance, and we can accommodate the load. But those of you that were not able to get on last week live, I apologize, and hope you're able to watch the replay, and so you're up to speed. Because frankly, if you haven't watched part 1, then you may be lost. I'm going to assume that everybody on part 2 has, if you weren't on the webinar live last week, that you have watched the replay, and so you kind of know what we're talking about and what we did. Part 1 did record just fine, and so hopefully all of you that needed to watch the replay did. And of course, the other nice thing about that is you can go back and watch it multiple times. In fact, I've gotten some feedback from several people that said it was really handy to be able to pause it and take notes and go back and restart it. And so that's one of the nice things about today's technology and the ability to replay. Also, if you do stick on till the end today, I've got a special offer that I think a lot of you will find attractive. So just a brief review of what we did last week. Started off by clarifying some of the terminology and definitions, and again, some of the terms that frequently are kicked around are not used correctly or certainly not consistently, so I hope we've got everybody on the same page there. I gave you the overall sequence for finding and removing malware on infected systems. And that's basically you start off with the rogues and then deal with traditional malware and go from there to rootkits. And at the end, I did give you a homework assignment. And so I like to put that in quotes because most of us haven't had homework assignments for quite a few years. But at any rate, I'm going to do a little poll here and just see how we did. And here we go. And all right, I guess I have to click there. So, Bryce, are you seeing the poll? Is it on the screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I got a poll coming.
Good. All right, and we'll give it another 30 seconds or so here and see how people are doing. And just in case we do have anybody on that doesn't know what I'm talking about, that didn't watch part 1, the homework assignment was a video to watch with a lot of really useful, helpful information. And so looks like probably most of the people that were going to respond have. And so I'll go ahead and close it. And here are the results. 83% of you voted. Out of that, a little over half, 55%, said yes, you did watch the video. Another 20% started watching but didn't finish it, and it's almost an hour and a half, so I realize that's a pretty serious commitment of time and can understand that. 4% couldn't find it, and frankly, it wasn't quite as easy to find as I expected. I gave a lot of clues, and then just for grins, I tried some Google searches myself as if I didn't know where to find it, and it took a little bit more work than I expected, so I did make the link available directly to people that asked for it, and I think, Bryce, you may have posted that as well. So,
yeah, I think I did.
Okay, so anyway, I'm glad that only 4% couldn't find it. Those are likely to be the ones that either weren't on live or didn't, whatever. And 21% did not watch it, and that's okay too. But at least that gives me some idea that most of you at least have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about, what was in there. And I'm not going to repeat anything that was in the video, but I am just going to go back and go into the process in some more detail and pick up where we left off. So as far as dealing with traditional malware, which is where we were, you're going to find and identify any active, viral, or malicious processes. Once you do, you need to terminate those processes, and I say process, you're dealing with one at a time. So find it, terminate it, figure out how it got activated, and in almost every case that will be in the registry somewhere. So you'll need to remove or restore any of those registry entries that were infected by the malware, then delete or clean the infected programs, and block the ability for it to come back. And then lather, rinse, repeat, and go back and look for the next one, because it's rare that there'll only be one malicious process running. Not unheard of or impossible, but generally there'll be anywhere from about 3 to 7 is the typical range that I expect to find. This is a flow chart that I didn't show last week, and I know a lot of you haven't seen flow charts much or any, but I think it does an effective job of showing the overall procedure. So I'm going to go through that in a little bit of detail here. First part, obviously, with rogues, and one thing about rogues, there's typically only one. And usually if there is one, it's very much in your face, very obvious. You have to deal with it before you can do anything else. So that's why that's the first step. Then you come down to the number 1 on the flow chart, and that's where you look for a malicious process, whether it's through Task Manager or preferably Process Explorer. But the reality is sometimes you may be at the dentist office, and they say, oh, we've got a computer problem. And you say, well, let me take a look at it. And you don't have all your tools with you. You've always got Task Manager available to you. So that's one of the reasons that's what I focus on here. So the point is, you find a process that you know or suspect is malicious, and you kill it. When you do that, one of two things is going to happen. Either everything is going to keep working just like it was, or it's not. So if killing that process kills Windows, then that lets you know it really was required. That's not a guarantee that that process wasn't infected, but at least it does tell you that Windows, for right now at least, isn't going to run without it. So at that point, make a note that it is a required process and reboot. And when you do, come back, pick up with number 1, and move on to the next one. On the other hand, if the system is still running normally, the next thing you want to look for after you've terminated that one is that does the process come back on its own? A lot of malware will recreate itself, restart itself, even reload itself. And I say reload itself. It's usually what's known as a buddy process, another process that was running specifically for the purpose of seeing if you've terminated the main malware process. And if you have, then it does whatever it has to get it back. So the point is, if it comes back on its own and you didn't ask it to, then that's not a 100% guarantee that it's malicious, but it does make it suspicious. So make a note of that and then go on to the next one. On the other hand, if it doesn't come back and it wasn't required by Windows, you could probably go ahead and remove it from the registry at that point. Realistically, you probably want to do a little bit more investigation before you do that, but the point is, once you've taken that step, once you've taken it out of the registry, then the next time you reboot, it won't come back. So that's the whole middle part of that flow chart that gets you through dealing with all of the malicious or suspicious processes, one after another. And again, you may do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, maybe more. Rarely more than that, but that's generally what it looks like. But at some point, you've gone through the list and gotten everything that seemed to be suspicious to you or malicious. The final step is to deal with rootkits. And we're going to get into some more details of rootkits next. But generally, like the rogues, there's typically only one rootkit. There may be a few different pieces of it, but it's rare to have multiple rootkits on an infected system. And only after you've done that do you do a scan. Everything else that we've been looking at here has been a manual process of identifying, finding, and getting rid of the malware. And so the technicians that routinely do one scan after another and another and another, and each one takes an hour or longer, you've eliminated all that time and all that waiting. And so, but once you've gotten through the heavy lifting here with these major steps, there's likely to be a lot of other stuff left behind. That the reality is you could probably leave it alone. It's probably not hurting anything, but there could be a lot of clutter, and just to make it as clean as possible, that's when I'd go ahead and do, I'm saying a deep scan, but a thorough scan of some kind. And normally what I would use at that point is Malwarebytes. I know you're all familiar with Malwarebytes, great program, been around for a long time, and it'll take care of most of that stuff. But starting off with Malwarebytes is much more likely to miss a lot of the things that we've talked about finding manually here. So, in looking at rootkits, the first thing you need to do is be able to make the determination that there is a rootkit infection present, because they are the most deeply embedded type of malware, the hardest to detect, and in a lot of cases the hardest to get rid of. there are rarely any symptoms that would be obvious to the user, and in most cases not even any symptoms that are obvious to the tech unless you know exactly what to look for. So that's what I'm going to talk about next, is some of the things to look for, some symptoms of a rootkit infection. And this isn't stuff you'd read in a book anywhere. It's just things that I've found from dealing with a lot of them over the years. One of the first common symptoms of a rootkit infection would be Google redirects. And I say Google, it could be any search engine, but the idea here is the user does a search, and they get a normal page of search results. They click on a link, and it goes somewhere completely unrelated to what they were searching on. And in most cases, it won't be an obviously malicious site, like a porn site, a gambling site, drug site, or anything like that. It'll more commonly be either a search page, a travel page of some kind, maybe a resort or something like that, something fairly innocuous and then likely to leave the user kind of shaking their head, well, why did it come here? And then they go back and click on another link and it goes where it should. Or even click on the same link again and it could go where it should. Because the point is, with most of these Google redirects, they're fairly random. They're not real consistent. They're not going to be doing the same thing every time, because there again, that would make it obvious that there's something wrong. And the bad guys put a lot of effort into keeping the user and even the tech from knowing there's anything wrong. Because again, they're making money from having that computer infected. As soon as the user knows there's something wrong with it, they'd bring it to you or call you in to fix it, then the bad guy's gravy train stops. So that's why the Google redirect. Yes, go ahead, Bryce.
Sorry to interrupt there. A few people are getting bandwidth slurring, so like a word extends because of bandwidth problems. Is there anything you can do on that on your side at this point?
Not really. I'm using a wired connection, and it's plenty fast. And I can't. I wouldn't think that the GoToWebinar would be having a bandwidth issue. But thank you for letting me know that. In fact, I'll try to slow my voice down a little bit in case that's causing some of it. I know I talk fast sometimes, but I'm trying to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, all right, no problems.
Okay. So again, with the Google redirects, it may be every 10th link they click on, or after every 27 minutes of inactivity, or something more random like that. But the point is, if the user reports that on a fairly regular basis they're clicking on links that their search engine took them to that don't go where they should, that would be a pretty good symptom that there is a rootkit infection present. Another one, in fact, I used to call this my 100% indication, because for a couple of years, every computer I saw that was infected by a rootkit was unable to do manual Windows updates. Now, in most cases, the automatic updates were still working, but if you clicked on Windows Update, it would fail in one way or another. Now, of course, there are a lot of Windows Update problems, a lot of reasons that you could have trouble, but point is, if you're consistently getting a couple of particular situations in terms of Windows Update failures, then that was a pretty good indication of a rootkit infection. Now, I say I did call it my 100% scenario, but about a year ago, I had a computer that clearly had a rootkit infection that was still able to do manual Windows updates. And since then, I've had a couple of more. So now it's more like my 95 or 96 or 98% indicator. But the point is, I always check to see if a computer can do manual Windows updates. And if it can't, then put a big red flag there that there's a good chance that it is a rootkit infection. The other symptom that would be indication of a rootkit infection, you download a file, it downloads normally, everything seems to be just fine, but then as soon as that download completes, a message pops up from the system tray saying the file you just downloaded, and it echoes back the name of that file, was infected, and so it's been deleted. And every time I've seen that happen, it's been on a program like Malwarebytes or some other security or anti-malware type of program. So I don't know whether it affects every download or just the ones that they really don't want you to have. But the point is, if you see that message, that is a 100% guarantee of a rootkit infection. There's actually a fourth symptom that I don't have on the slide, but it's come back. It was popular a few years ago, and then I didn't see any for about 5 years. But now I've run into several of them over the last year, and that is a radio station is playing out of the computer. Now, obviously, anybody can go to a radio station's website and say live stream or listen now or whatever. But I'm saying the radio station is coming out of the computer without a browser even being open. And when that happens, it's pretty obvious. When I say radio station, it may be music, it may be talk, it may be commercials, it may be English, maybe some other language. But again, it doesn't take long to figure out that it is a radio station. And usually when that happens, it's using a lot of CPU time, and it's also using a lot of network bandwidth. So the computer is running real slow, But if you're patient enough, you can probably still get into Task Manager, and you can probably still get to a command prompt and do a netstat and things like that. But when you do, what you'll find is that the CPU utilization is pretty close to 100%. And if you can check the network activity, they're likely to be close to 100 separate connections, all of them very active. So that explains why the computer is so slow. But again, that is definitely a symptom of a rootkit. So any one of those symptoms is a pretty good indication, but 2 or more guaranteed it is a rootkit infection. And unfortunately, most antivirus programs and even more generic anti-malware programs have some rootkit detection, but really not very good. And so relying on the traditional antivirus, anti-malware programs to detect or block or get rid of rootkits is probably not going to work for you for most of today's rootkits. There are several different ways that rootkits can actually operate. The early ones infected legitimate Windows processes. They would infect programs like Explorer.exe or LSASS or whatever. And so when you look through Task Manager, you wouldn't see anything out of the ordinary. But they were actually infected. They weren't the Microsoft-provided versions of those programs. The newer type, and where it really started becoming a challenge, was when a rootkit came out called TDL3, or that's the category of rootkit. And as it turns out, there were TDL1 and TDL2 rootkits before that. But those were pretty well handled by the antivirus programs. At least that's my assumption, because I never saw or even heard of TDL1 and 2. But TDL3 was huge. And what they did that was so different and makes it so much harder to detect is infect the .sys, the sys files. Now, those of you that have been around for a while know about the early type of sys files, all the way back to the old config sys and autoexec bat, back in the early days of sound cards and CD-ROM drives. Required entries into config sys and autoexec files to work. But that's not what we're talking about here. Those were basically just text files, what we used to call 80-column card image files. But the .sys files we're talking about here are the actual device drivers. They are executable code that provide the interface between the device and the operating system. And so the sys files that I have personally seen infected are ANSI sys, ATAPI.sys, which controls the hard drives, PCI.sys, which of course is everything on the PCI bus, and the keyboard sys file. So obviously all of those are important files and important devices that you need to use. But also, as you know, the sys files don't show up in Task Manager or anywhere else that you or I can easily see them. So it takes more specific detection to look for and fix those. Another type of rootkit that's also been around since the early days would infect the boot sector and or the master boot record of the drive, of the disk. And in fact, the early versions of these were back in the really early versions of malware overall. In fact, we didn't even have the term malware back then. It was just viruses. And they were infecting the boot sector of the floppy disk. And of course, the problem with this type of infection is every time you reboot, the computer gets reinfected. In fact, the ones that infect the boot sector or the master boot record are referred to as bootkits. So they're bootkits / rootkits, or vice versa. Another type of rootkit, or another symptom of a rootkit infection, would be to hide the files in a way that is not just using the hidden attribute. It's some completely different method. And so those actually require you to boot into a non-Windows operating system to get rid of them. So don't see many of those, but it's another possible way that a rootkit could infect a system. Another thing that's really nasty about a lot of the rootkits today, especially the more sophisticated ones, is that they recognize some of the anti-rootkit programs and block those from running. The main anti-rootkit program that I use and recommend is TDSS Killer from Kaspersky. Great program, does a very good job. And about half the rootkits I've run into in the last year or so keep TDSS Killer from running. So that's kind of the price of success. Just like a lot of traditional malware will keep Malwarebytes from running. So you have to have a plan B. In a lot of cases, the plan C and D and E and F and G and on and on. So that's what you're dealing with, and some of the pieces that come into play with the rootkits. So one more review overall of the whole methodology. Find and remove any rogue software. And then get into the traditional malware. Find, identify, and remove it. Viruses, worms, trojans, keyloggers, backdoors, and whatever. And keep them from coming back. And finally, find and remove any rootkits. So a couple of common questions that come up I'll just go ahead and address. So Bryce, you don't have to if they're in your question box. Safe mode. and different people that know what they're doing have legitimate different opinions. My opinion about safe mode is I only use it when I have to. I want to do as much virus cleanup and malware removal as I can in normal mode. There are a few situations where I can't initially get into normal mode, so may have to use safe mode initially. But again, I want to do it only as long as I have to be able to get the system clean enough to get into normal mode for most of the cleanup. There are a couple of reasons for that. For one, if you're running in safe mode, you're not seeing what the infected user is actually seeing, and so you're not really sure that you even know what they're talking about or that you found the symptoms, and by the same token that you've gotten rid of it. Also, some of the things you may need to do aren't available to you in safe mode, like add removed programs. And believe it or not, for some of the malware you run into today, add removed programs will get rid of it. So that's kind of a nice surprise and a nice change. But if I am using safe mode, I probably want to use with networking as much as possible, because even at that point, there's a good chance you're going to want to connect to the internet, download something, or you may have to be connected to the local area network to see some other resource or whatever. So that's my take on safe mode. System restore. I touched on that in the first session. System restore can play a useful role, especially in dealing with rogues. But a lot of times the malware itself will disable the functionality of system restore. And that could happen in either of a couple of ways. It may actually delete the program itself, the system restore program, or it may delete or corrupt or move the system restore files. So those are a couple of ways the system restore may not be able to work. The way that the average tech gets into safe mode typically at that point, or into system restore, is to reboot into safe mode. And of course, one of the questions that comes up at that point is, do you want to use system restore to roll the clock back? And the problem with that is that a lot of malware will survive safe mode. It'll be just as active in safe mode as it was in normal mode, depending on how it's activated. But the way around that is to boot into safe mode command prompt and then run the system restore from there. The actual command is rstrui.exe. So that's how you can get into system restore on an infected system if you couldn't otherwise. But just to review, even successful system restore generally doesn't actually remove any malware. The system is probably still infected, but it's taking you back to a time before that infection was active. So most of the things that may have been blocking you from doing the things you normally want to do are probably out of your way at that point. When I say it generally doesn't remove any malware, it could if the malware is still just in the temp folders or temporary internet files, because system restore generally does clear those out to what they were at the time that the restore point was made. But most of the more sophisticated malware will go ahead and install itself into a permanent location, or possibly under program files, x86, or whatever. But as I say, just doing a system restore back to a time before it was active, in a lot of cases will remove the obstacles to malware cleanup. And what I mean by that, as we touched on last week, is that you may not be able to run Task Manager or regedit or msconfig or whatever. And so system restore should take you back before those roadblocks were thrown up. So one more review of what we've covered last week and today, how to handle rogues differently from traditional viruses. In a lot of ways they are the same type of infection, but they're so different in their presentation, the fact that you see them, they're very much in your face, you pretty much got to deal with them. And so that's why I put them at the first of the list. Very importantly, how to know when a computer is infected by a rootkit. I gave you those 3 telltale signs, plus the 4th one with the radio station playing. How to keep from spending hours scanning an infected computer. And again, most of this process is not about scanning. Scanning is kind of just the last step to make sure you've got all the remaining pieces taken care of. And very importantly, how to keep it from coming back after you've removed it, and that's mostly a matter of finding its activation method in the registry or possibly through a buddy process and getting rid of those as well. So you're really ripping it out by its roots instead of just letting a scanning program find it and delete the actual program, because a lot of them, as you know, will come back. Now, as you were hoping for, and a lot of you have already asked me where we go from here, because there is a better way. It's a full workshop on the subject that I call virus remediation training. I'm still looking for a cooler name for it. That name doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it does describe what it's all about. It's about remediating viruses and other forms of malware. And that is a full workshop that's actually 8 hours of concentrated, intense content. And it is hands-on. It's really made up of 3 pieces, education, tools, and a methodology. And what you've seen here last week and today is really excerpted from those 2 half days of training. That's the normal way it's presented these days because it's a long day when we do it in the full day. I still do some of those, but doing it in 2 days of 4 hours each lets you do some other work that day and be billable instead of just giving up the full day. Typical results, and I know you want to know this, you will find and remove over 95% of all malware. Actual number pretty close to 100%. Less than 5% will come back. Actual number for all practical purposes is 0. And you'll do all that in less than 2 hours. And the actual time is usually less than 1 hour. But these are actually guaranteed results, which we'll come back to. As far as education, I mentioned it's concentrated training. It's really in 4 sessions. The first session is the introduction, terminology, definitions, and how malware has evolved over the years. It's kind of an expanded version of what we covered here mostly last week. Second session is where the real meat of the workshop starts, and that's about the registry. I know all of you are techs. You have been in the registry. You know what it looks like and that sort of thing. The reality is most techs, what they know about the registry has been they had a problem, did a Google search, and found an article that said fix it by going into the registry and changing this key. And that's fine. It's good you've been in there. Hopefully you have a healthy respect for it. But the point is to really be good with malware removal and keeping it out permanently requires a much more in-depth understanding of the registry than what most techs have. And frankly, there hasn't been much good training out there. I've been teaching the registry for almost 15 years now. And so I feel like I've got a good handle on what needs to be in there, what's important, and just gotten rid of any fluff or any just kind of nice-to-know information, concentrating on what you need to know. So start off with the structure of the registry, where it's physically located on the hard drive. Hives, keys, and subkeys, what they are, how they relate, what they mean to you. The different data types that are used in the registry. Safely editing the registry using various tools, and I want to emphasize safely because it's a very vulnerable part of what we're dealing with. You don't want to hurt it. So we talk about the importance of backups and safely doing those things. Also using various tools. It's not just regedit. That is the one you'll use the most, but there's some other tools that are important to know about too. Talk about control sets, what they are and the role they play in the registry, and how users are handled in the registry. That can be a very important piece to make sure that everything stays the way it needs to be, and most importantly, registry backup and recovery techniques, and as the bullet point says, much more with 24 major topics covered. I want to talk a little bit here about the tools, and also a little bit of a distinction between what I call tools versus what the average person would refer to as tools. Because you say tools to the average tech, and they're thinking in terms of scanning tools like Malwarebytes or Super Anti-Spyware or TDSS Killer or whatever. And I include those in my definition, but I think it's much broader than that. Because definitely an important tool as far as I'm concerned is the workbook that comes with the workshop. That's up to 125 pages now. And that documents everything we talk about in the workshop, reviews it, and gives you an easy reference to go back to for anything that wasn't clear or that needs further explanation. The other part of that is actually a supplement to the workbook now that most of you have already received. It's a booklet that I gave Bryce to distribute to his subscribers a while back. It's called Advanced PC Troubleshooting Techniques, Tips, Tools, and Tricks. And if you don't have that, it's still available to you. But the point is, that started off as some content from the workbook. There were a few things in the workbook. I had a category called Miscellaneous Troubleshooting Tips or something like that. And I had 3 or 4 things that weren't necessarily just about malware, but they obviously had a malware context. But then that went up to 5 or 6, 7, 8. When it got to be 10 or 12, I started thinking, you know, this really needs to be a separate document because I'm not trying to make the workbook any bigger than it has to be. And a lot of that was things that weren't necessarily just about malware. So that's where that booklet came from. As it stands right now, and as most of you have it, it's 22 pages with 35 separate tips in it. And I intend to keep updating that, so if you want to check back at that same address periodically, I already have 4 more tips that I want to add to it, and not sure exactly when that'll get done, but hopefully in the next week or so. But again, that's I consider that a supplement to the workbook, so you got close to 150 pages of content. As far as the scanning tools, one of the things I really want to emphasize here is that yes, there are some good ones out there, but no, you don't need to spend all the scanning time on cleaning up a system that most techs typically do. Also, one of the things that's unfortunate, but a lot of techs learn something and they think it never changes. Well, surprise, surprise, it does change. Now, some of the tools that you may have been using for years and years are still out there, still available, and actually still being updated. But some of those scanning tools, yes, they're still being updated, but only for the infection methods that they know about. And so in the full workshop, I name names. I talk about which ones are good, which ones are not so good, and which ones you absolutely don't want to use under any circumstances. But anyway, get into that type of detail in the full workshop. But the other thing that's important to recognize is even tools that are good and that I recommend. If you don't use them in the right sequence, they're not going to be as effective as you want them to be. Also, the correct settings. Most of the scanning tools especially have different options, whether it's a quick scan, a flash scan, a smart scan, deep scan, thorough scan, whatever they call it, and it really matters which ones you do, both in terms of being the most effective and also being the most efficient, spending no more time in scanning than is absolutely necessary. Other tools. Everybody that attends a full workshop gets a CD that is the Virus Repair Toolkit, and that includes a lot of stuff. Popular programs like Malwarebytes and TDSS Killer. Now, when I say programs, not the programs themselves, but you'll have links to download your own legal, up-to-date, current versions of those programs. Some very popular and some that are little known. In fact, I'm sure there's some on there that most of you have never heard of. So you will have the links to download your latest legal versions. In addition to that, though, there's some proprietary software that I have personally written. It's not available anywhere else except to people that take the full workshop. But the other thing that's been, frankly, kind of a nice surprise to me, a couple of years ago, a vendor approached me and said, well, we like what you're doing, training people to do things the right way instead of just throwing a bunch of scans at it, and we'd like to support that by giving any of your graduates a free, not-for-resale copy of our software. And so, well, that's nice, and that vendor was MCSoft, by the way. So I like MCSoft. I say nice things about them. I recommend them. But since then, 7 other vendors have jumped in. And at this point, we're up to over $450 worth of free software, and most of it is for a 12-month license. Some of the other tools that are included in it are different terms. But what I was trying to do is get to the point that there was so much value in the additional free software that the whole workshop became a real no-brainer. So we'll come back to that in just a second. As far as the methodology, that's what you've seen here, but we obviously get into much more detail in it in the full workshop, and that's session 3, the actual virus repair techniques, the step-by-step procedure, again, based on the flow chart and going through Task Manager, Process Explorer, things that we've started talking about here. We spent a lot of time talking about how malware hides out, the different hiding places, mostly in the registry, and identifying the buddy processes, things like that. In looking through the registry, kind of the early viruses started off using the run keys. That was a mechanism that Microsoft gave vendors to use to start things automatically with Windows. And so it was also something that the virus writers used pretty quickly as well. They've gone way beyond what Microsoft ever had in mind for the run keys, and then beyond that, a lot of other keys. In fact, we actually talk about over 200 separate keys in the registry where malware could be hiding out. Dealing with rootkits, you saw kind of the overview of that and some of the ways to detect that there is a rootkit, but specific tools to deal with it, and again, step-by-step procedures. And we get into effective use of the Virus Repair Toolkit. And once again, much more with 21 major topics covered in Session 3. And finally, Session 4 is the lab session where we actually demonstrate the different tools we've been talking about and show how these procedures work. And if you're attending a workshop in person, you're invited to bring in an infected computer. We'll actually clean it up as part of the lab session. So that's the overall content of the workshop. This is the schedule when I do it in a full day, which again is not the norm anymore, but it gives you a good idea of kind of the time allocation. Basically about an hour on Session 1, the introduction, about 2.5 hours on the registry, and that usually runs more like 2:45 or so. The methodology, Session 3, that's a good 3 hours now, 3:15 or so, and that kind of runs into Session 4, which is the lab session. So that's the overall breakdown, but it ends up being between 8 and 9 hours of actual content, plus break time, lunch time, or whatever. As far as the actual workshops themselves, how you get it is several options. Again, I'm in Houston. I do public training here in my office about once a month. I'm also available to do those on site, either in Houston or out of town. Come to you and train your techs if you have a lot. And I say a lot. How many depends on mostly the travel issues. But surely if you have 10 or more techs, it would be worthwhile for me to come to you pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Locally or close by, it could be as few as 5 that would make it worthwhile to do an on-site presentation. I'm doing more and more dates remotely. In fact, almost every week I've got a remote workshop available, and so that makes it much more flexible for you and the ability to attend from your home, office, or shop without the travel expenses, without being away from the business for whatever period of time. I actually had a gentleman come here this month, in fact, from Missouri. He took 4 days away from his business because he wanted to attend one in person. But it's all up to you, depending on how much of a need and where you see the value. So there's my email address for a more complete schedule and pricing for on-site training, and that'll be available to you later as well. I'm not going to stay on this slide. But here are the upcoming dates that are scheduled as of right now. If you want to look at your calendar and you see a particular date you'd like to attend, again, they're mostly 2 days, generally Tuesday and Wednesday. The on-site ones, or the in-person here in Houston, are from 10 to 3 each day with an hour for lunch, and there again they'll actually go a little bit over that. But point is, if you're in the Houston area or somewhere fairly close, or if you want to come to Houston, especially if you're in the Northeast about now and want to get away from that snow and ice, it's about 60 degrees here today. But the point is, you don't have to fight rush hour traffic before or after, and you can get some work done, deal with some client issues first thing in the morning and later in the afternoon. So there again, it makes it more manageable for you. As far as the virtual attendance, the online classes, I schedule those for different starting times, and that way people in different parts of the world and in the U.S. for that matter can attend whatever's convenient for them. And so as an example, the ones that are from noon to 4, one I did recently, I had one gentleman on that one from Hawaii where it was 7 o'clock in the morning starting time, and another in the UK where it was 5 o'clock in the evening. So by having those different times, it makes it convenient for pretty much anybody anywhere in the world. In the U.S., a lot of people don't want to take time away from their normal, what we would consider a normal work day, their billable time, and so that was the original idea behind the 6 to 10 in the evening ones. But as it turns out, in standard time, when we're not on daylight time, 6 o'clock in the evening here is 11 o'clock in the morning in Australia the next day, and so that's worked out well for people down under. So at any rate, those are the different starting times. And in the past, I have gone to a lot of other cities and presented them, and I'm one of those strange people that still enjoys getting on airplanes and going to places, so I plan to do some more of that this year. I've kind of been holding off in the last 6 months for a year or so, but that's clearly in my plans. And there again, if you're in another city and would like to consider an on-site, if we could figure out a way to combine that with a public workshop, I'm definitely open to that. But I generally try to schedule the workshops about 6 weeks out. It happens that, of course, March being the same calendar sequence as February, chances are these virtual workshops, the same times will apply on those same dates in March. So those aren't official yet, but that's generally my expectation. So what's included in the workshop? It's not just the workshop itself. There's a lot of additional stuff that comes along with it, including your own certification. You're designated as a Certified Malware Removal Specialist, or CMRS, and there's a nice parchment certificate that you either get to take home with you or it'll be mailed to you, even overseas. We do mail the physical certificate, and a gorgeous badge you can put on your website. I had a recent graduate, in fact I had one a few months ago that said, hey, I've come up with this badge if you want to offer it to people to put on their websites. It looked good. I appreciated his effort, but this week I got one that just blew me away from another graduate. Said, I've been meaning to do this for a while, and what do you think? And it's gorgeous. So anyway, you become a CMRS. Also, whether you attend in person or on a remote, you do have access to links to replay the workshop for at least 30 days afterwards. Because there again, it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. I don't expect anybody to absorb and fully digest everything the first time through. So being able to go back and replay the workshop and spend as much time as you need on different parts of it is useful. 30 days is about how long I can count on the replays being available. It's actually closer to 45. It's a function of the storage space that the service provider makes available. So maybe a little bit longer, but anyway, 30 days you can count on. Also, I have a membership program called Continuing Malware Education Program, the CME program, that will keep you current. And everybody that attends a full workshop, that includes 12 months membership in that CME program. So you can always get the latest information, and that includes new information coming from me as new threats come out, new tools are available, or whatever. And that does actually include 12 months access to me directly. So if you have a malware issue you need help with, you can call me. Everybody gets my cell phone number, my email address, and obviously I'm not always available right at that moment, but it's quick turnaround, and I'll work with you for the whole term of your membership in the program. I mentioned the bonus software, and right now the suggested retail price of that is over $450, and I'm still talking to some additional vendors, including one that I've got a verbal commitment on. That's going to push it well over the $500 mark. So that's what's included, and there's more, but those are the highlights of it. So now you might be wondering about the cost, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised here. Only $495 per attendee, and that's for everything we talked about. And to thank you for being a TechNibble subscriber and being on the webinar, everybody on this webinar is entitled to a 10% discount. Also, if you have multiple attendees from the same organization, there are discounts for those, and I'll certainly be glad to talk to you one-on-one about those arrangements or for on-site. And again, that does include 12 months membership in the CME program. And most of you are probably way ahead of me on this as far as figuring out how long it's going to take that class to pay for itself, but typically it's a matter of a few days or worst case a week or two. So return on investment just from the dollar standpoint is very obvious and immediate. It's real black and white. That's one of the things I enjoy about doing this and talking to people about it. Cost is almost never an issue. Yes, cash flow can be, but point is in figuring out how long it's going to take the workshop to pay for itself, there are really just three things to consider. How many hours you're going to save on each repair? How good are you already? How many virus repairs or cleanups are you doing in a typical week? And what's your hourly rate? So just to plug some numbers in there, let's say you're already pretty good and you're doing a typical virus cleanup or malware repair in 3 hours, and this brings it down to 2 hours. So you just save an hour per repair, you do one of those a day, 5 a week, and your billing rate is just $62.50, which I hope most of you are well above that. Then in 8 days you've gotten that $495 investment back, and with a 10% discount, 7.2 days. But obviously those numbers can vary a lot, and if you want to see your exact numbers for your situation, there's an ROI calculator that's on my website, and you can just plug in your numbers and see. But again, in some cases, in fact, I've had multiple reports that it paid for itself the first day. So, as I say, money is generally not a big concern for people that are doing a serious number of malware cleanups. I mentioned a guarantee, and this is a guarantee. You will find and remove over 95% of all malware on infected systems. And again, actual number pretty close to 100%. Less than 5% will come back. Actual number, for all practical purposes, 0. And you do it all in less than 2 hours. Actual number is less than an hour in most cases, and in fact a recent addition to the toolbox has brought that down by another 10 to 15 minutes. Anything that you happen to run into that doesn't fit into those parameters, I will work with you one-on-one to make sure that that particular issue is resolved. And it could be that something that I presented in the workshop just wasn't clear enough, or it hadn't registered or whatever, or it may be something new that I didn't talk about. And so that's part of my feedback loop, is seeing that new stuff. So I have no problem with that guarantee at all. If that does interest you, if you want to dig deeper and get more details, these are small classes, and so I suggest that you check the dates and see what's good for you and schedule it as far in advance as possible. I do limit the online classes to a maximum of 10 people. Unlike this webinar where Bryce is handling all the questions, on the live workshops, the full workshops, everybody has a live mic, and so there's plenty of Q&A going on during the workshop. In Houston, my conference room is pretty small, and 6 is an absolute maximum in there. 4 is comfortable. 6 is we're getting to know each other real well. And in the in-person workshops, the first 4 attendees are invited to bring in infected computers. And just to show you I'm putting my money where my mouth is here, we could clean up 4 infected computers in that lab session. So when I say that we do it in less than an hour, I really mean it. So I'm going to put on my salesman hat for just a second here. Bear with me, because I'm still mostly a geek. But you do need to consider what it'll cost you not to have the training. For one thing, if you bill your client for all the time you're spending on malware cleanup, they're sure not going to be happy with that. Or even worse is spending time you can't bill for. If you're an MSP and your clients are on a fixed price model, I had one MSP client that had to eat $1,800 on one virus cleanup. So how many times would that have paid for the class? From the client standpoint, if they're without the use of the functional computer for hours or days at a time, that can have a huge impact on them, especially small business. From a client standpoint, if you decide to wipe and reload, they're going to be unhappy, guaranteed. It's not going to look the same. Something's going to be lost. But again, that's a very common approach. In fact, I talked to a person in a networking group today that just had that experience with one of the big box retailers, and he's not happy. Also, if the malware comes back after you supposedly cleaned it up, guaranteed the client's not going to be happy about that, and you sure aren't going to be able to charge for that second cleanup. So, in a sales pitch, that's just some reminders of why the training is so important. So this is the actual link, and I'm not going to, it's not live for you to click on right now. But the point is, my website, thevirusdoc.com, there's a whole section in there on virus remediation training with a lot of additional information, some FAQs, a more detailed list of the deliverables, a little video, a few more things like that. And if you want to attend one of these, you'll need to contact me directly. There's my email address, and there's my mobile phone. So again, this is not the same number that you'll see on the website. This is directly to me, my mobile, which is silenced right now, but it's generally the best and quickest way to get in touch with me. So if you want to dig deeper, if you want to attend the full workshop, again, 10% discount, that brings it down to $445.50. And again, the additional free software you get for attending is a higher value than that right there. So you're basically getting the workshop for free. Now, I know that's not, yeah, that's a salesperson coming out again. But if you want to do that, you'll need to call or email me for a coupon code to give you that discount. And there are two reasons for that. I can't have just anybody watching a YouTube replay, 6 months from now and sign up with the coupon code. But also, it's my way of limiting the attendance in each one. Because again, have more than about 10 people in a workshop, then it becomes pretty much unmanageable as far as the questions. So email or call me. I'll give you that coupon code. We'll confirm that the date you want to attend is available. Also, if cash flow is an issue, which it is for a lot of us, but PayPal has what they used to call it the Bill Me Later option, now they call it PayPal Credit. But that gives you up to 6 months to pay for it. And there again, in most cases, the course will have paid for itself long before that 6 months is up. And one more time, there's the website, thevirusdoc.com. So, I've done a lot of talking. You've done a lot of listening. I appreciate that. We're about on target as far as where I wanted to be on the timing. Bryce, I assume you've got some questions that have been building up.
Yes. Let's see.
Actually, I'll go back to that previous page with the website on it. In fact, let me go back to the website and the mobile phone. Okay.
Yeah. This one's from John Marks. Do you think they'll ever infect the BIOS?
Oh, sure. They did that 20 years ago. There was in fact, there was a particular virus that was called Chernobyl, or was it CIT? I forget. There were some letters.
I think it was CIH.
CIH, that's it. And those were the initials of the young man in China that wrote that virus. And in fact, it was so pervasive that there was one particular motherboard manufacturer that on their motherboards they put a sticker right on top of the main chipset that said, if you don't install the antivirus program that came with this, then your warranty is void. So, but again, that was 20 years ago. They made a comeback a year or so ago. They're not common, but it's certainly something they can do. I say that I don't know about the UEFI, which is the kind of the modern replacement for the BIOS. I would assume they're much more secure, but even so, there's so much at stake that it wouldn't surprise me. In fact, I'd be surprised if somebody doesn't figure out how to infect those. Because if you think about it, once again, a lot of attacks, their response to a virus issue is to wipe and reload. Well, if it's in the BIOS, that's not going to do any good. It'll come right back. So, great question. Thank you.
What programs do you use other than the ones you have mentioned in this webinar? From Brandon Jones.
Okay, the actual programs that I use are just pretty much the ones that I mentioned. There are quite a few others that I talk about in the workshop and say different things about, and there's some that I say this could be useful, or some that don't waste your time, and there's at least one I absolutely do not ever use under any circumstances. But there again, a public format like this, don't want to get myself in trouble by naming a lot of names of ones that you want to avoid or that are not useful. But the ones that I definitely use and recommend, especially for scanning, and again, that's typically what most people are concerned about, is scanning, would be Malwarebytes and TDSS Killer. But there's some others that do an adequate job, and I mentioned MCSoft, a good protection. Another one I like for active protection is Viper. One thing in terms of active protection, these days there is no free antivirus program that provides adequate protection, period. And I know a lot of people still think they're doing their clients a favor by installing a free antivirus program. You're not. You're giving them a false sense of security. So got to be a paid program and internet security, not just antivirus. And here again, I know a lot of people have had trouble with internet security programs. I have too, with the firewalls and then having to train them and jump through the hoops and extra messages. I know that. But they've gotten much better, and the protection is so important that got to have a paid internet security program.
This one's from Brandon Jones. What do you think of Windows Defender?
Nothing. I don't think anything good about Windows Defender. It's another one of those that was a good program once upon a time. Now it falls in that category of free software that might, at best, give the user a false sense of security. Don't count on it.
This one's from Ed Anderson. So beyond the stuff you mentioned just then with having an antivirus, are there any other prevention techniques?
Well, the main things are kind of the obvious ones that everybody knows. The keeping the Windows updates current, the antivirus, and most importantly, the Flash and Java updates, and all the other associated things. Flash and Java are the biggest ones, but a very high percentage of malware now is infecting systems because they're taking advantage of known flaws and vulnerabilities in Flash, Java, Adobe Reader, whatever. There are over 400 programs that have known vulnerabilities in them. But it's a very steep cliff you fall off of after you get through Java, Flash, Adobe Reader, Real-Time or Real Player, QuickTime, and a few of those, and then that top 5 or so account for probably 90 or 95% of all vulnerabilities that are used. And actually, some of the Office infections are coming back. A long time ago, the macro viruses that infected Word and Excel, those are back. And so if you got it, in fact, I have a client I saw this week that was still running Office 2002. What was called Office XP was also 2002, which is not supported anymore. There are no more updates for it. And another client happened to get and in fact, he opened an attachment that was a doc file the other day. Fortunately, he was not the same one that was on the old version, and the doc file, I can guarantee it was infected, but it did not cause this particular client any problem.
I think client education is also an important one there as well. A lot of the residential clients that I dealt with, a big part of it was just teaching them what to look out for and what not to click on.
Yeah, but there again, so much of it doesn't require them to do anything. They do something perfectly normal, like go to AOL.com and get infected. We're seeing more and more drive-by downloads, plus all the social engineering has gotten so much more sophisticated. In fact, this client I mentioned that got the infected Word document the other day, a very bright guy. He's a former CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and this looked normal to him. And of course, as soon as I saw it, in fact, we actually had lunch together, and I made a hard copy of the email because he did receive an email that had this link in it. And just off the top of my head, I listed about 11 different things I saw in there that were my tip-off that this was bogus. But again, to the average user, it looks normal. So you can't really blame the user as much as we did in the old days. I mean, you still can. They probably at some level did something wrong. But just going to Yahoo.com or AOL.com, hundreds of thousands of people have gotten infected from doing exactly one of those two things in the last month or two.
Yeah, just the drive-bys, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few questions about what do you think of a certain product. I'm gonna mix them all together and just rapid fire a couple brands. What do you think of ESET as a product?
ESET I like. There are about 5 products out there that I consider to be credible and do a decent job, and ESET is one of those.
What about, say, ClamWin or Clam Sentinel?
That is not one of them.
All right, fair enough. Malwarebytes versus TDS Killer.
Well, they're different. And Malwarebytes actually has 3 different programs. Most of what people are familiar with is the Malwarebytes anti-malware that we've been using for years. But they also have a separate program, Malwarebytes Anti-Rootkit. and that is in beta. It's been in beta for a long time. It's not a production product, but anybody can use it, download it and use it with the usual caveats of using a beta product. That's more comparable to TDSS Killer. TDSS Killer is strictly a rootkit detection program. There's also another Malwarebytes program called Malwarebytes Anti-Exploit that, again, is different from the others, and that is specifically designed to block infections by the encrypting ransomware type programs, CryptoLocker, CryptoWall, and all of those. So there again, a lot of people, and again, pretty savvy techies get confused, or they say Malwarebytes, or they hear me say Malwarebytes Anti-Rootkit or Malwarebytes Anti-Exploit, and they think I'm talking about the original Malwarebytes Anti-Malware. I'm not. 3 different products.
Do you think ESET online, the online scan, is worth anything?
Most of the vendors have an online scan that you can do as a double check or a one-shot thing. It's not active protection, and of course some of the products do have active protection with their definitions in the cloud. And any scan could find something, could fix something, but there again, the bad guys have gone to such great extent to prevent detection that the likelihood of finding everything with any online scan today is a lot lower than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Have you heard of Voodoo Shield? Someone asked specifically about that one.
Voodoo Shield?
I haven't heard of that one. Have you?
I have not.
Okay. And any thoughts on Bitdefender?
Bitdefender is another one of the 5 that I consider to be credible.
Yeah.
In fact, just without giving away everything or revealing things that I'm not allowed to, Bitdefender and ESET are 2 of the vendors that are on that list of the ones that have said anybody that completes your course, we will give them a 1-year not for resale license of our internet security product. So we're talking about name brands here.
Yeah. What about going off the name brands? What about disconnecting? This one's from Freddie Dillard. This one says, what about disconnecting from the internet prior to starting, as Mark Rosovich suggested?
I generally don't, and Mark and I don't disagree on many things, and this is not a strong disagreement, but in the old days, it was pretty much a given that if the computer got infected and was on a local area network, it would infect the other computers on the network. I generally don't see that these days. I'd say 90% of the malware I deal with is not infecting anything else. And so I normally don't disconnect from the local area network or the internet unless I'm seeing some indication that it is spreading. And yes, there is some minimal risk there, but again, virus behavior is so much different now from what it was in the old days. The other part of that is that it was real easy to just pull the plug, disconnect the Ethernet cable, and now you're dealing more and more with wireless networks, and so it's not quite as simple, and it's not a big deal, but to me it's generally not worth the effort, because the reality is that in doing the cleanup, you're probably going to need to be connected to the internet for something, or to the company's local area network for some other resources. If you need to print something out, you're going to have to be on the network. So again, for me, it's generally not worth the effort, but I'm not saying that Mark is telling you anything wrong in the video.
Speaking of Mark, how much do you use the Cisternal tools like Process Explorer and the other ones?
Process Explorer is the main one that I use and talk about, and interestingly enough, the time that we spend on Process Explorer in the full workshop is about the same amount of time that Mark spent in the video. It's about 20-25 minutes talking specifically about Process Explorer. I don't talk about or use some of the other tools that he mentioned in the video. I do refer to auto runs and demonstrate a few things with it, and that's another good tool. But some of the others that he uses, I think, as much as I enjoyed that presentation, and I've watched it 6 times myself and get something new out of it every time. There's a tremendous amount of information in there. But having said that, some of it is more kind of in that academic, nice-to-know category as opposed to solve a problem, get it fixed type category. And so, as I've indicated earlier, I tend to focus on just the things that directly lead to a solution.
Sorry.
What was that? So, yeah, those 2 tools from Sysinternals are the main ones. But again, it's mostly Process Explorer with a little bit on auto runs.
If you have problems accessing Windows, do you use a boot CD, like Kaspersky's boot CD, to do cleanups?
Generally, but there again, only as long as I have to get to the point that I can get into the native Windows environment. Part of that depends on the particular nature of the infection and the symptoms and that sort of thing.
Bit more of a basic question. What's the difference between antivirus and anti-malware software?
It's mostly nomenclature and what a vendor thinks sounds best. As far as pure definitions, anti-malware would be a more inclusive type of program, where antivirus, if it's just looking for viruses, then that would exclude browser hijackers or whatever. So, but the reality is, any antivirus program, any credible antivirus program today, really has full anti-malware capability. So, the answer is none.
If a malware deletes a system file, would you recommend doing a total wipe and reinstallation of the OS?
No. I almost never recommend a total wipe and reload.
Okay. Even if it knocks out a system file?
Sure. That's easy to get back, especially if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. If it's hundreds, maybe a different story. But even at that, System File Checker should take care of all that for you.
Yeah. What are the best books to read for additional reference?
You know, there was a time there were a lot of good books out there, and frankly I haven't been looking for them as much lately, but there don't seem to be as many good ones out there lately either. So I don't really have any good references. Even my own book that you saw in the first video was more of an end-user book, and again, that's 10 years ago. So the last good books that I saw on the registry, for instance, were about Windows 2000. So that pretty much dates it right there.
I'd imagine they'd move. The whole industry would move a bit too quick for a book to go through its writing and publishing stages. By the time it's out, it might be not really talking about the latest stuff.
That's a big part of the problem, especially with the traditional publishers, because it can easily take 2 years from the time that they agree to have an author write something until the time it's actually on the stores, on the shelves at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. Now, on the other hand, a lot more authors, myself included, are self-publishing and can be much quicker about it, much quicker turnaround, shorter print runs, and able to update them more often. And for that matter, just I mentioned the workbook that is included in the full workshop. That is continually updated. And I mentioned it's 125 pages. The previous version was 121 pages. And when it first started, it was 32 pages. So, but that's kind of apples to apples. That's not a mass market traditional publisher type book. It's strictly a workbook for attendees in the workshop.
Speaking, someone said they're unable to attend the virtual workshops in February. How soon will we be offering the next virtual options?
Pretty much every month it follows a similar schedule. I generally schedule 3 remotes per month plus 1 in person, and the 3 remotes are at the 3 different starting times. And so, just go back here to the, I don't remember what slide number it was, sorry, but I'll pull up those dates because, again, March being the same, there we go. So my expectation is that the virtual workshops will also be those same time frames, March 10th and 11th from noon to 4, March 17th, 18th from 6 to 10 in the evening, and March 24th, 25th from 10 to 2. So generally, and obviously with as many people as we have on the call, even if a small percentage signed up, then the next few months would be booked up. So may have to look a few months down the road. But at any rate, this is what's on the calendar right now through the end of February and the one in my office the first week of March. But again, in fact, I'll go ahead and commit to that. I will do these same dates in March. So if February doesn't work for you, but March would, then we'll go ahead and open those up.
Great. Another question is, with Kaspersky, as it's a fairly heavy option in regards to antivirus software, do you believe it's worth a performance hit to have for it to be such a comprehensive suite?
Yes, for a couple of reasons. For one, you've got to have the protection. malicious website blocking is absolutely essential these days. Back to what I was talking about with the AOL and Yahoo, I mean, those were literally, I wasn't making names out of the air. Those were literally sites that were the victims of CryptoWall 2.0, because those sites and hundreds of others, thousands of others for that matter, have advertising on them. And those advertisements are filled in spaces that are, they use what's known as ad servers to figure out what would be an appropriate ad to put in each of those spaces. What the bad guys did was uploaded poisoned ads to those ad servers, and they manipulated the SEO to get them to the top of the list. And so, as you know, each one of those, every person that is on one of those sites could theoretically have different ads based on what kind of cookies are on their machine, what websites they've been going to, what kind of searches they've been doing, or whatever. And so it was really nothing that Yahoo did wrong, or that AOL did wrong, or Match.com, or Huffington Post, or all some of the sites that were infected. But it's just the nature of the way that the advertising works. Now, that was combined with the fact that we're usually using vulnerabilities in Flash or Java to do that. So once again, if the systems were locked down with an internet security program and the updates were current, then they wouldn't have the problem. But back to the performance issue, yes, most of us, especially if you've been in the industry for a long, you remember what it was like when Norton Antivirus came out, and especially about 2004, 2005, 2006. You install one of those programs and just watch the performance slow to a crawl. And today, the anti-malware, the internet security suites do have a lot of code in them, and a lot of what could be considered bloat. But at the same time, look at how much faster the CPUs are these days. Look at how much more RAM we've got, how much faster it is in the hard drive space. So yes, there is some overhead associated with internet security suites, but in my experience, if you're talking about a computer that's less than about 5 years old, you'd be hard-pressed to see a difference in performance between just an antivirus and the full internet security suite from the same vendor.
Someone asked, how can I intentionally infect test computers or the virtual instances to practice?
That's a question that comes up a good bit, and one that I frankly don't have a good answer to. For a couple of reasons. For one, I deal with some of the name brand antivirus, anti-malware companies. I have people I can talk to there, and I've asked them for samples, and they basically said, we can't release those. There'd be too much liability if something, we know you're not going to do anything bad with it, but if somehow somebody hacked your computer and got it or whatever, and so you can't get them from a legitimate source. The other place to get it, of course, would be from the virus writers themselves, and they try to protect them. In fact, if you've gotten into it very much, you'll know that a lot of viruses will not infect a system if it's on a virtual machine. And the reason for that is they know the antivirus companies are running virtual machines and honeypots to try to attract the viruses to them so they can analyze them and see what goes into them. And so the antivirus vendors aren't going to give up good working samples, and the virus writers aren't going to give up good working samples, and so all that's left is that really the category of hackers and people that really want to be bad guys but don't quite have the street cred or whatever, and I don't really want to deal with them. So bottom line, I don't have a source for any real active malware. There's some things you can do that are obviously high risk that might attract them, and as I say, the idea of a honeypot to try to build something that will attract them is something that a lot of researchers do. But I don't have a simple answer for it.
A couple of people asked, what was that link again, both for the phone number and the link again for the discount, please?
Okay, I'll go back to that.
Someone was saying, go to any Russian website for active malware.
Yeah, and in fact, there is actually a legitimate site I'll give you that that has some samples, and that's Steve Gibson, Gibson Research Corporation, grc.com. Steve is another one of the pioneers in the industry. In fact, back when Peter Norton was the guru of the operating system and viruses, Steve Gibson was the guru of hard drives. He's still out there. And I was on his site recently. He does have, when I looked, I think there were about 5 or 6 different links to download malware samples with the usual disclaimers and be careful, I'm not responsible, that sort of thing. So that's a site that you might be able to get something useful from.
Larry O said he's been in IT for over 20 years and he's definitely seeing an uptick in infections when students are at home for vacations such as Christmas, spring break, summer vacation, and so forth. Do you see the same?
I frankly don't see any pattern. The pattern I do see is that it comes in waves. For instance, I've not seen any serious malware outbreak in the last few weeks. In fact, probably since the first of the year. On the other hand, November, December were crazy, especially with CryptoWall 2.0 and once they poisoned those ad servers, and then PowerLex cranked up. And PowerLex I didn't even talk about in here, but that's another whole new category of malware that's driving a lot of people crazy. So, no, I have not been able to tie it to any particular, whether it's holidays or vacations or anything in particular. There may be some patterns there that I just haven't seen. But one thing that's absolutely consistent is it's definitely an accelerating trend. In fact, it doesn't seem like that long ago that the antivirus vendors were trying to get everybody to believe there are actually 10,000 different viruses out there. Of course, for the last couple of years, they've been saying 100,000 new ones per month and 200,000. And one of the testing organizations, I believe it was avtest.org, the other day indicated there are 12 million new samples per month now. 400,000 new samples per day.
Jeez.
So it's just crazy. But again,
yeah, there's
so much of a payoff for it. The people that do this are making tremendous amounts of money. It's not going to slow down. And especially the encrypting ransomware, we've just seen the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it doesn't take much for them to change a couple of lines of code and completely change the MD5 of the virus as well.
Yep.
Someone asked, there's a few more brand name ones here. What do you think of F-Secure and Kaspersky?
Kaspersky is on my list, F-Secure, and I always get confused because there's F-Prot and F-Secure. And I frankly don't remember which is which. One of the F's is okay. So without doing more research right now, that's as far as I'll go with that one.
How about running Hitman Pro and, say, Malwarebytes together while they're scanning, and then be using externals while scanning? I guess the question there is running multiple software together, like
you absolutely
different ones.
Yeah, you absolutely do not want to have multiple active protection running at the same time. Now, Malwarebytes generally doesn't seem to conflict with or interfere with other traditional active protection. I'm still not sure that I trust that to always be the case. So as far as active protection, definitely only one antivirus, only one firewall, one whatever. Now, generally speaking, there's no problem scanning with a lot of different products. The only problem there is the time it takes and the likelihood that it's not going to catch everything.
Would you recommend running a scan and then doing the manual work at the same time?
No. Do the manual work first and use the scan to clean up the leftovers. Now,
what do you think?
The exception to that, and I touched on this last week with the rogues. In a lot of cases, Malwarebytes especially is good at finding and getting rid of the rogues. And so if that's what you're dealing with initially, I'd go ahead and start off with a Malwarebytes scan. The catch is you may not be able to because of some of the other roadblocks that is thrown up. But once you do, Malwarebytes should be able to get rid of most of the rogues.
What do you think about Combo Fix?
I mentioned that there's one program I'll say absolutely never use under any circumstances. You just named it.
Why is that?
It is such a dangerous program, and it's from a very reputable, reliable, good source. Bleeping Computer I have a very high regard for, but even they say don't use Combo Fix unless you're working with one of our techs that has told you to use it and told you how to use it. It does not play well with others. It breaks a lot of stuff. It's the only program that I tell everybody in the workshop do not use. Don't even put it on your system.
Well, that's interesting because a lot of techs love that, but no, it's good to know that.
And what I find interesting is that most of the techs that love it say, yeah, it breaks so and so, but generally it's done good for me. And And I will confess that up till a couple of years ago, I would occasionally resort to using Combo Fix. And every time I did, I gritted my teeth and closed my eyes and hoped for the best. And fortunately, the last 2 times I used it, and again, it's been about 2 years ago, in each case it ran for over an hour and did not solve the problem. So I said, thank you, Combo Fix. You finally given me a good excuse to never use you again. So, and point is, back then, as I say, that was kind of a last resort. It was the only thing left. Today, it's not the only thing left. There are a lot of better solutions, safer solutions, more reliable solutions.
How about Rogue Killer?
I like Rogue Killer. And that's another one that's been around for a long time. I didn't use it much until recently, and frankly, it was the first one. It was really a good solution for power licks. And there again, since that time, there's some other good solutions out there that are frankly better than Rogue Killer, easier to use, more reliable, whatever. But Rogue Killer, I give them credit for being around for a long time and for being on the leading edge of having a fix for power licks, which is a completely different animal from everything else we've dealt with before.
What's your opinion on DNS options such as Norton Connect Safe and Web of Trust, that sort of thing?
Using a DNS server other than what your ISP provides does give you some additional protection. And in fact, in my booklet that most of your subscribers probably have now, there's actually a tip in there about alternate DNS servers. And and I frankly don't know the particulars of who does what and the pros and cons, but generally speaking, of course, any internet service provider is going to have their own DNS server, but there are public ones out there that may be better in terms of security, performance, or whatever.
Do you have any recommended programs to protect against CryptoLock, and other than the usual updating Windows and keep your apps updated?
There are actually 3. In fact, there are now 4 programs that have come out specifically to close the holes, because as you know, about half the antivirus programs today still don't detect or block the encrypting ransomware on its way in because of the way that the infections are being done. But there were 3 programs, and a 4th one was introduced just last week. The first one that I knew of was from Foolish IT, the D7 people, or a guy, Nick Shaw, and that's called Crypto Prevent. When it first came out, he made it available for free, and he has since improved it a lot and also come out with a professional version. And even the professional version, lifetime license, is $15, so it's a very inexpensive program. But they're also Hitman Pro has come out. Actually, they had a program called Hitman Pro Alert that was actually a few years old, intended to block the banking Trojans, the Zeus type banking Trojans, and when the cryptos hit, they realized that with a little bit of additional code, they could also protect against that type of infection. So that's Hitman Pro Alert. And Malwarebytes, I mentioned a few minutes ago, they have another program called Malwarebytes Anti-Exploit, and that's doing the same type of thing. Last week, Bitdefender announced a similar program. So any of those programs do provide additional protection specifically against the encrypting ransomware type of malware. And they shouldn't conflict with the regular antivirus and internet security type programs, but they will conflict with each other. So do not install more than one of those programs on a computer.
One more application specific is, have you ever used TechWaru? W-A-R-U.
Oh yes, yeah. In fact, TechWaru is one of the other cooperating vendors that does provide free software for graduates of the workshop. And frankly, the way this came about, they approached me and said, "We've got a tool that does some stuff, but it's kind of light on malware. We'd like to beef that up. Would you be interested in working with us?" And so that was a collaboration. I basically wrote the specs for a program to be added to TechWaru, and it is available only now to TechWaru subscribers who have also completed my workshop. But the new tool is called Registry Investigator, and that actually automates a lot of this process of looking through those 200+ registry keys and identifying the ones that are infected and fixing them automatically. But there again, it's not scanning for malware, it's scanning the registry keys that are typically infected by malware. So I'm really impressed by what I've seen of TechWaru. There's a lot in it that I have not used and haven't gotten as familiar with as I'd like to. But they seem to be a first-class company to deal with, and we worked well together. And again, I wrote the specs, and they wrote the code.
Let's see. a few others saying they have it, and yeah, it's a great tool, and it's good. Yeah, it's good software. What was the item you just mentioned in after Malwarebytes anti-exploit?
The most recent one that just came out last week is from Bitdefender, and I think they call it Bitdefender. It's got vaccine in the name, whether it's ransomware vaccine or crypto vaccine or something like that. But if you just go to Bitdefender and look for downloads, it is a free download. Now, a qualifier on that, again, it just came out last week, and reading the description, it seems to only apply to the original CryptoWall and CryptoWall 2, not CryptoWall 3.0. So it seems to be very specific, where the others claim to protect against any encrypting ransomware. So, and I have not seen the Bitdefender one firsthand yet. I've just read their documentation, and so it may be a little bit premature. I wouldn't quite throw it into the same mix with the other three yet. But again, Bitdefender is a good, credible company, and so they do good stuff. But I just don't know as much about it yet as I need to.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you can answer this one, but why does Microsoft not run an MD5 hash on system DLLs? Because he sees system DLLs get injected.
You're right. I can't answer that one.
It sounds like that one's from Microsoft, that one.
Yeah.
But it's something they probably should be doing. And that's it for the questions. Unless anyone else wants to get a last-minute one in.
All right. Well, you've done great with fielding all of those, Bryce. I appreciate your help with it. Obviously, there's no way I would have been able to go back and forth between that window and what I was talking about without getting horribly distracted.
No problems at all. Happy to help.
Okay, and once again, the recording seems to be going just fine, and so once this is over, I'll put it into usable format and send the links out to everybody.
Thank you very much. We've got a lot out of these questions, and thank you for the time.
Well, glad to do it, and as I say, I was willing to stick around as long as it took, so if there's any more trickling in, I'm not in any hurry to go anywhere.
Got a whole bunch of thanks so much. And someone's asking, what is their website? But that's up on the screen now. Is that the link that you want people to use?
Yes. Right, and I don't think that it's clickable live right now, but thevirusdoc.com, and then there are three major categories on the home page. The middle one is the virus remediation training. So that takes you to the schedule and the additional resources. There's an FAQ document and the deliverables, what's included, a little video from me, the ROI calculator. I forget what all's on there, but anything they could possibly want to know. But there again, anybody's welcome to contact me directly at that email address or at my mobile phone. In fact, yeah, there we go. Sorry, I forgot there was another bullet point there. So that is my mobile. And my workday doesn't end at 5 o'clock. Maybe sometimes 5 a.m., but anyway, those are different ways you can contact me. And especially if you want to sign up for a workshop, you'll need to contact me, A, to make sure there's still space in the one that you want, and B, to get the coupon code.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, Bryce, thank you, and thank all of you for attending. I look forward to working with you in the future.
All right. You too. Thank you.